Okay, now it's time to try out some actual CSS coding in CodeFan. Let's do it. Okay, here we have some HTML. We have an H1, an H3, some paragraphs, some links, and an image. In this session, we will focus on writing CSS, so I will double-click on the CSS to expand it. Let's begin with changing the H1. The H1 has a default color of black. If we want to change that, we can select the H1 element by writing H1. Then we write the curly brackets, and within these curly brackets, we will write all the rules that should apply to the H1. We can change the text color by using the CSS property color. Then we write a colon, space, and then the color. Don't forget to always end your CSS rules with a semicolon. Let's write another rule. We can change the size of the text by using the CSS property font size. So font size, colon, and then the value, and I will give it 45 pixels. Now we can see that the H1 is a little bit bigger. We can also change the font family by using the CSS property font family. And I will pick Arial. Another thing we can change is we can center it by using the CSS property text align and give it the value center. If we want to have it right aligned instead, we can just write right here. But I want it centered, so I will have center. Next up, the H3. Let's give it another color. We select the H3 by writing H3, open a block of code with the curly brackets, and then we use the CSS property color again. And we write the color that we want. Let's do the same with the paragraphs as well. We select the paragraph element by writing P, and then the curly brackets, color, and then the color we want. You can see that these rules apply to all the paragraphs in the document. To find these specific colors, you can go into this webpage. Here you can find a lot of different colors that you can use. Let's go back, and don't forget to save. Okay, that was some text styling. Now let's move on to background color. To change the background color of the whole page, we need to target the HTML element called body. And in CodePen, we don't see the body element, but it's really wrapping all of these HTML elements. So let's try it out. I'm gonna maximize the CSS window again. And we select the HTML element called body by writing body. We open the curly brackets, and we use the CSS property called background. And I will pick linen for the background color. Now we can see that the background color of the whole page just changed. Save. Maybe you have noticed that if you have the other view with the result at the bottom, or if you have made the result part a little bit bigger, that the links and the image get placed next to each other. That's because the default styling of these elements is that they display in line. Maybe you've added an image to a Word document sometime and had trouble positioning the image. Sometimes it's next to the text, sometimes it's behind, sometimes it's a block. Well, right now our image and our link displays inline, meaning it will only take up the amount of space that it needs. But I want both of the links and the image to take up the whole width of the page. I don't want them to be next to each other. And to solve this, I will change the CSS property display to block. So I will begin with choosing the anchor tag element by writing A, and then curly brackets, and the CSS property display. And as I said, the default is inline, so this will not change anything. But I want it to take up the whole width, so I will change the display to block. And now they are taking up the whole width of the page. And just to be safe, I will do the same thing with the image. Cool. Let's save this. Let's change the links some more to make them look like buttons. We'll start by giving them a background color. Background. And the color. Let's also add a little margin between the two links so that we can tell them apart. I will use the CSS property margin bottom right now. But if you want margin on all sides of an element, you can use the CSS property margin instead. I also would like some space between the edges and the text. And that space here is called padding. And right now the padding is 0. And let's increase that. Okay. Another thing that we can do is getting rid of the underlining. To remove that underline, we can use text decoration. So right now, the text decoration is set to underline, but we can set it to none. And there goes the line. I also would like the text in the button to be bold. There's a CSS property called font weight that we can use. We will give it the value bold. Nice. And do you remember how to change the text color? Just color and then the color we want. I will go for white. Now it's starting to look like a button, but it's a little bit long. Since we set it to display block, it's now taking up the whole width of the page. But let's give it a width. Maybe 150 pixels. Nice. We can also center the text within the buttons if we want, with text align. Maybe we also want to change the font family to be Arial, like our H1. Cool. I think the last thing I will change right now is to make the corners a little rounded. And to do that, we can use the CSS property called border radius. And I will give it a value of 20 pixels. The lower this number, the smaller the rounding. So I think 20 pixels will be a good value. Now I am happy with the way my buttons look, but feel free to play around even more with this. And don't forget to save. There's a really cool thing you can try out if you write a new rule and a:hover and then curly brackets. The rules you will write here will apply if the user hovers over your button. So if I write background hot pink and then hover over the buttons, the background color will change. So whatever you write within these curly brackets will apply if the user hovers over your button. Let's also change the image a little bit. I want to make it smaller than it is now. We have already targeted the image element here, so we can just continue within these curly brackets. And to change the size, we can use the CSS properties width and or height. The thing is, if I change both the width and the height, the image might be distorted. Let's have a look. I'll change the width to 200 pixels. And let's also change the height to 200 pixels. Now the image gets a little bit distorted. To solve this, we can either just change the width or the height, or we can change both if we want it to be square, like this, but then we need to add another CSS property to crop the image properly. And the property we will use is called object fit. And if I set the value to cover, that will make the image keep its aspect ratio. So now it's square, but it's not distorted. Another fun thing we can do with the image is to give it a border. Then we can use the CSS property border. And as the value, we will specify the size, the appearance, and the color. And I will make this 5 pixels. And I want the style or the appearance to be solid. And the color to be coral, like my buttons. If I change this solid here to dotted, you can see that it gets another styling. But I want it to be solid. If we want, we can also give this border a border radius, just like we did with the buttons, to make it rounded. So I will write border radius and 20 pixels. Okay, cool. Let's save this. One last thing we're going to have a look at now is how we can style elements different from each other. Maybe you have 2 links that should be 2 different colors, or maybe I would like to write a paragraph of text below my image now that should be another size or another color than the other paragraphs. Let's begin with creating a new paragraph in the HTML. When I do that, it will get the same styling as the other paragraphs. I can see that it's coral colored just as the other paragraphs up here. To be able to style it differently than the others, we can use something called class names. I will add an attribute called class. And I will give it a class name. I will copy this text because that exact name is what we will use to style this paragraph specifically. Let's go back to the CSS. In order to style a class rather than a general element, we have to write a dot and then the class name. The rest is the same, so curly brackets and then the rules. I'm just going to scroll down so that we can see the result here as well. Okay, so first I will change the font size to 10 pixels. Now I can see that it's a little bit smaller than the paragraph up here. I will also change the color to be hot pink. Now we can see that the first paragraph is bigger and coral colored, and this image text is smaller and pink.